in the report to Twimbit Purpose Index, where we actually benchmark leading banks in the APAC to understand their revenue growth vis-a-vis how they emphasize on equitable value that can be created for all stakeholders. That also includes our shareholders, customers, employees, our partners, and society at large. Keeping that in mind, I would like to begin by asking Mohan, as I was speaking, the economic conditions are volatile today, and the banks are pushing towards purpose driven banking. What investments do you see and are hearing about from banking technology leaders?
Okay, thank you. I think great question. I think there are quite a few different investments that I've noticed banks are looking at, and we talk to our banking customers all the time. Of course, the big thing that this is on everyone's lips is AI investments, right? And we're seeing them increasingly adopting AI to improve customer service. This is usually the first thing they do. Personalize some of their product offerings, and of course, streamlining operations. We see that they are also, focusing because of the costs involved. They're focusing on practical AI applications rather than experimental projects. Things like risk assessment, fraud detection, personalized banking. And all of this are aligned, as we talk, with purpose-driven banking goals through better customer understanding and service. So that's the first thing. The next thing that we're seeing is, I would see around a digital customer experience, and of course, digital transformation and automation. And these are things that have been happening for quite some time. It's probably during COVID, and it's continuing to happen. What we're seeing is kind of investment in seamless omni-channel experiences, enhanced digital onboarding and authentication, mobile solutions.
Right.
And all of these implementations help streamline processes, reduce operational costs, and improve service delivery, which will focus to the banking requirements that they want.
Great. Thanks, Mohan. Anything else, Kuna, that you've been hearing?
Yeah, I think to add on to what Mohan said, I think while I think AI has become a transformative initiative across many banks, what I've seen and heard banks doing is in preparation or in a preparatory phase to making AI projects successful. Banks are also in the phase of modernizing their apps. A lot of the banks have come from environments where it was IBM mainframe and monolithic apps, that were driving some of the businesses. But I think as they progress towards, seamless banking experience for their customers and the need to respond and bring products out with a much faster time to market, there's a need to modernize their apps, break down the apps into services so that they can have updates more often. And also this modernization of apps becomes like an underpinning capability for the subsequent AI projects that they are going to implement. And the other benefit of the modernization of the applications that they use within banks and for the customer-facing apps is the ability for these modern apps to then have connectivity to the wider ecosystem. So what we are also seeing is a lot of banks are partnering with ecosystem partners. I've seen some local banks partner with, say, property management sites, to push their loan products, via the property management sites. All this can only be made possible with the ability for their applications to interface with these other ecosystem players, and as well as other fintech providers that are actually partnering with banks. So the modernization of apps provides the foundational layer to then interact with third-party ecosystem players, partnerships with fintech players, as well as preparing them for AI initiatives.
So I wanted to add a point on top of Kuna's. I think with all of these initiatives, the modernization, the digital transformation, AI, all of this underpins what the banks are doing. So what's critical that we are seeing is, of course, the whole cybersecurity and data protection, AI governance, cyber governance. With the rise of digital banking, with mobile banking,
Right.
safeguarding customer data and ensuring the robust cybersecurity measures are becoming more and more critical.
Great. So, while we mentioned that, there's app modernization happening, there is a consideration for AI deployments. We are also considering that, we want to create this digital customer experience for the customer. But at the outset of it, have you really seen that any bank making an effort which goes beyond just thinking about them, but also have create an environment for the customer to actually interact in a better, in a more secure format with the bank?
That's a good question. I think if you take this what you said in parts, right? There's the AI initiative that's taking place, but separately there's also a concerted effort to make banking seamless and secure.
Right.
And I think at some point we see banks bringing them together.
Yeah.
And if I take a step back and look at banks modernizing the apps and
Yeah.
they're connecting with an external ecosystem, I think there's a lot of investments going into protecting that outward connection with the ecosystem.
Right.
If you look at today's banks, if you look at in any enterprise, not just banks,
Right.
we are in a situation where there's a lot of connectivity to the outside world through what we call APIs. And
Right.
this has introduced a expanded threat surface. So while we want to increase revenue, all banks want to increase revenue and introduce new products through partnerships with third-party ecosystems and make
Right.
it easier for their customers to consume these products through their platform,
Yeah.
securing those outward connections, these APIs that connect with these third-party systems has become a number one prerogative. And it is something that we keep hearing from our customers, right?
Right.
Hey, we want to expand our products and services through connecting to third-party systems, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we protect all of this information flow, especially since banking is a highly regulated industry. And data privacy, there's a lot of data privacy laws that governs, how banks protect and keep the data, where they keep the data, how they keep it. So
Right.
security then becomes very imperative, and therefore we do see a lot of uptick in security investments, especially related to API protection and application protection.
So, Guna, following up on that, when we talk about API security, we talk about making this entire ecosystem secure, but at the same time, banks are really robust in terms of bringing in new third-party providers and expanding the product suite where we're listening about embedded finance, open finance, right? And that becomes like a big segment of revenue generation today, which we are talking about as fee-based income, right? Which comes, and when we're talking about this fee-based income, it's purely from transactional revenue from API calls that are being made. Do you think that both from a bank standpoint and from the fintech standpoint, they are ready enough to create robust ecosystems for customers that can thrive and scale and make it even into a larger ecosystem, which not just plays between banks and fintechs, but is going beyond to more lifestyle, to more enterprise kind solutions?
Um, I think it's already happening, Ronika. If you look at even banks in, not even banks in Singapore, if you look at banks in Thailand, Malaysia, and even Indonesia, banks are now having to compete firstly with the super apps that's come
Right.
up. And
Yeah.
therefore, if you are a bank only doing banking, then you will become a traditional organization. So banks are increasingly scaling the connectivity with the third-party ecosystem. Today, you want to be able to pay bills, book a cab, even buy a property, like
Yeah.
how a local bank in Singapore has done it. And
Right.
and when they get into this level of partnerships, you would expect a extremely a secure infrastructure for their security, especially when you're dealing with providing your customer data to a third-party provider. You need to make sure there are guardrails in place that
Right.
protects the data, protects the application that hosts the data, and as well as the data that's in transit, right? And
Right.
and therefore, a lot of banks are rethinking the overall security infrastructure.
Right.
They're looking at consolidating some of the solutions around how they build security.
Right.
I personally was in a roundtable. I heard a banking CISO tell me that, hey, you know what? He's looking at reducing the number of point products he has in his security solution, because they are expanding to the ecosystem, they are looking at platformization. You hear this word very often, platformization of
Platformization, yeah.
security architecture. So it's not just security. Banks are looking at platformization of their products that they use to protect their banking infrastructure. And this, again, is top of mind. And in certain cases, this is even discussed at the board level. Security has become a board level discussion for banks.
I think to add to Kuna, I mean, he talked about some of these super apps. I think a lot of governments are also, trying to introduce competition,
Yeah.
by providing banking licenses to non-traditional players that are coming into the industry, and I think it's a good thing. And a lot of these players are actually focusing on exactly what you said, right? On lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? When you look at these apps, you're like, are they banking apps or are they lifestyle apps?
Right.
So yes, so I do believe the ecosystem will become larger. I do believe you'll see different players coming into it, and you never know. They will be actually targeting maybe a certain segment, customer segment, right? Compared, very different from what the larger banks are doing, right? And to focus on those segments, you have to provide a lot of lifestyle type products.
True. So, given that, Mohan, and I think both of you touched upon it earlier as well, that we've seen rapid advancement in AI technologies, right? Now, when we talk about lifestyle solutions to be considered for customers which are integrated, your banks are integrated in one app, your lifestyle choices are integrated in all of them, you're actually the data is lying at the highest interval of there where it is actually learning about a customer's everyday moments and based on that creating personalized experience. Now that comes with AI technologies, but given that situation that is a lot of information to be known about a customer, therefore it creates a pressing concern in terms of how CISOs and CIOs are thinking about integrating AI into a banking ecosystem. In fact, as Kuna mentioned, that banking as an entire industry is a highly regulated market, and eventually it comes down to the regulatory authorities of how they want to ensure that the customer's data is protected. But at the same time, banks have this agenda of making sure that I'm creating hyper personalized experiences for my customers.
Yeah, it's a conundrum actually. But in a way, banks cannot shy away from implementing AI projects, as precisely because of the reasons you talked about, hyper personalization, right?
Right.
But at the same time, they also cannot have their data live elsewhere, because the data is their business in a sense. So they will have to keep it on-prem. And fortunately, for them, today's technologies around AI allows them to have the cake and eat it. Let me explain why. Because today, a bank can implement AI projects in-house at their own location without having their data leaving their premises. So in a way, with AI, the good thing is there are ways where you can actually implement an AI project completely on your premise with your data and in a very secure manner. Or you could also have a choice of having it run on the cloud, and outsourcing it to a AI as a service provider. So there are options, and banks have a choice of matching and mixing it, and without having to have the data leave their premise. Technologies exist today where they can have the data on-prem, have an AI model or a application sitting on the cloud, and still provide the hyper-personalized service for their customers. So it is a situation where they have to assess how much risk are they willing to take, and what level of exposure to the data they're willing to give.
Yeah, and I think, on top of what Kuna is saying,
Right.
with AI, yes, there are a lot of risks, and banks, but for banks, it's actually a big opportunity because they do have the data. They do have the historical data of each customer, what they've been spending, what they're doing, right? And this is, AI goal for them to be able to provide very hyper-personalized type of products, right? So, but there's still a lot of risks, and actually right now there are technologies, and FI provides some of them, where you can make sure that your data doesn't leave your premises, and you're still able to leverage all of the AI capabilities. But we are starting to see maybe a little bit, we're waiting to see what kind of model governance and regulatory compliance comes around AI. We know in the region, as we go across the regions, there are a lot of data sovereignty laws. So which means the data cannot leave the country, which is why what we are seeing is a huge increase in the build out of sovereign AI clouds. So each country is building out their clouds because they don't want data to leave the shores, right? So I think sovereign AIs will be able to help solve some of these issues with data sovereignty. If you're using a hyperscaler, you never know where the data is going to be.
Great. So, Mohan, have you also seen like a particular use case which has become very famous in terms of the banking environment where the adoption of AI is at the highest level and in the most secure format? Have you seen any of those examples coming
Yeah,
up?
look, I think it's not only banks, right? And I always call it the hello world of AI applications, which is the service chatbot, right?
Right.
So everyone has implemented it, and I think that's pretty straightforward to implement.
Yeah.
Now, you can do a service chatbot, but your service chatbot needs to be able to communicate with customer information and customer data, right? So you have typical use cases called RAG, right? So the RAG use case is used by a lot of banks and a lot of other customers where you're using a foundational model, but you're actually calling your specific customer data to enhance the response to the chatbot. So this is a very, very, very simple AI use case that we are seeing almost everywhere right now. In fact, it's kind of funny because in some countries, there are laws coming out that are saying that if you can ask an AI chatbot, are you an AI chatbot? And by law, the chatbot has to respond, yes, I am a chatbot.
Wow.
It's kind of interesting.
So that means the next time when we are having this chat, the people can ask us, "Are you an actual AI avatar taking
Yeah, exactly.
webinar,
Yeah.
or are you really the human person?"
Yeah, but the AI avatar will look a lot much better than how I look right now.
Again, I think the technology is to reach to an extent where you can actually make a beautiful avatar of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think one of the other challenges
Yeah,
that we're seeing is or concerns is around talent,
yeah,
right? Talent and expertise. There's a notable shortage of professionals. I remember maybe like 10 to 5 years ago, it was all about cybersecurity talent. You couldn't find cybersecurity talent. Now you can't find talent in AI and data, in data science, etc. So that's in huge demand, and I think there's a lot of challenges around that right now.
So, do you think that banks are also considering of creating an AI center of excellence office within their tech stack, like just having a particular center of excellence
Yeah,
specifically focus on that?
I think almost all of them have an AI center of excellence, or they have a team of people
Right,
exploring the use cases, right? And I think we have learned that, hey, let's not jump into this. Let's try to focus on use cases that provide some ROI,
right,
and to make sure that it is safe, it fits within all the regulatory frameworks. Because as Kuna mentioned, and we all know banks are heavily regulated.
right.
We've seen customers where, usually what will happen is they will test all the AI applications and all of their use cases in the cloud. They will prove it out in the cloud. But however, because of regulatory requirements, when they go to production, when
Yeah,
they have to deploy it, they probably have to do it as hybrid, right?
right.
Because data cannot leave the country. Sometimes you can't use a hyperscaler. So we are feeling that in a lot of places, and this could be country by country, the
Right.
regulatory compliance laws within a country will drive the architecture.
Got it.
Versus when you usually look at architecture, you want it to be performant, highly scalable, low latency, etc. Whereas here you need to see like, hey, where's my data in rest, where's my data in transit, and you have to make sure that these are all this all follows the law.
Great, great. So while the complexities are there, banks are excited about AI. They already have started experimenting with use cases. They have the office in place. We are also seeing the entire awareness around data security and privacy risk. But then there is a huge cost that gets involved when it comes to this level of innovation. And while banks are looking at revenue growth, they're also looking at cost management, right? It is hard for banks today to actually make money because the traditional environment of making money of interest income has stagnated. And we all know that. Beyond that, it's fee-based income, as we have discussed. APIs, API management, having an open ecosystem is still a very valuable asset for banks to grow their per capita consumption of services. But what lies on top of them is that if we are able to bring innovation which AI is actually coming up with, and to the previous comment that I had, like deliver that actual hyper personalized experience. But to do all of that, there is a big challenge or a big balancing act that banking leaders have to play, which is around cost management and profitability. So, how do you think that these banking leaders are now trying to balance this equation and still trying to achieve the kind of revenue growth or EBITDA margins that can make them stay afloat?
Yeah, a very good point, because a lot of the AI infrastructure is not cheap. In fact, it's very expensive, right? And I think a lot of C-level folks have, one good example, right? A lot of folks, when they went to the cloud, everyone was cloudifying. A lot of them got sticker shock when they saw the bill coming back, right? Like, oh my God, how much is this, right? So they're concerned about this. It's like, hey, if I allow everyone in my company access to AI, how much is this going to cost me, right? Of course, they are also looking at the projects. What kind of projects can provide a good ROI, right? So instead of going with full-scale rollouts, they're doing pilot programs, phased implementations, and they wanted to test some of the use cases in a smaller scale, right? Of course, use the cloud to test, use the cloud to prove out a POC. But when you deploy, you need to understand the prevailing data sovereignty and kind of regulatory climate within your country, right? So look at high ROI use cases. For example, some areas that banks could look at are like fraud detection, risk assessment, and as I said, the customer service automation with chatbots.
Kuna, how about what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Mohan, right? I mean, I think that it's important to start with the phased implementation. As you said, implementing an AI, usually an AI implementation or AI consideration in the banking industry or for any industry is a transformative project. In many companies, you have the keep the lights on projects, you have the growth projects, and the transformative projects. AI is usually a transformative project. And therefore, it needs to be implemented in a phased approach. And as Mohan said, look for high ROI projects. Either it's high revenue generating or a cost reduction type of environment. For example, like within F5, for example, I run the marketing organization, and today we do almost every one of our translation requirements is done by AI. And that saves a few $100,000 a year, because that's what we spend on. So banks could look at easy win areas like, customer service, through a simple chatbot where they could get a turnkey solution from the market off the shelf without having to do complex training and complex implementation. Or they could look at using, a third-party provider, but keeping the data on-prem. So starting with this low risk, high impact type of implementation is probably the best way to start looking at AI. And it's also very important when it comes to AI to have the top buy-in. It needs to be top down.
Right.
Projects usually create a lot of security issues, so it's good to have a standardized top down with with identifying all the risks and making sure that the security team is bought into the implementation and is endorsed by the highest levels in the organization.
Yeah, on top of it, I mean, besides having top-down approval, it also has the highest level of visibility. In
Right.
fact, a lot of the projects that we've talked to, they have board level and C-level visibility, right? So it's very critical how you manage those projects and focus on the high ROIs, get those quick wins, and then move on to more bigger phases.
And more important, and also equally important, is to have an enterprise-wide AI governance framework or a model. This is super critical. Without you should not even start a project in an environment like a bank without an AI governance framework.
Absolutely. So, last 2 minutes left for us in this live session. I just want to have top three key takeaways from each one of you in terms of if you want to define what a purpose-driven bank look like in the age of becoming a technology-focused bank. What would be those three things based on all that we have discussed? We've discussed around AI deployments, cost management, profitability, data privacy and risk, how to create new revenue streams, API management, keeping all of that in mind, according to both of you, three takeaways of how a bank can become a purpose-driven, innovative bank.
Well, I can start off. I think number one is any bank should understand the evolutionary generational behaviors that they are targeting, because they are dealing with a for maybe for once they're dealing with a very complex multi-generational audience, and therefore not just hyper-personalization in general, but hyper-personalization to specific generational audience is critical. And number two, connecting to third-party ecosystem to expand their services much further beyond banking is going to be very critical for them to expand their revenue streams beyond the interest revenue streams that you spoke about. Now, underpinning that is to have a robust, thorough, thought-through security infrastructure, because that essentially is the one thing that protects the brand in the long run. To have a watertight security infrastructure as they go expanding, in their ecosystem and to the audience.
Right.
And just to add, I think Kuna said it quite well. I think just to add, I mean, all of this doesn't have to be done in-house. You can work with the ecosystem. You can, there is an ecosystem there to help you. It doesn't have to cost a huge amount, right? I know there are challenges right now with a lot of talent. You can work with, fintechs that are there to help you with new innovative ideas. And yeah, so I think rely and leverage the ecosystem. I think that's one of the things that we should think about. You don't have to do it all yourself.
Great. I think with that, thank you so much, Mohan and Kuna. This was a very insightful conversation. I think it gives us a strategic imperative in terms of how banks can build a purpose-driven organization which banks upon innovation, resilience, cybersecurity, and also think about AI at large, at scale. So thank you everyone who had joined our LinkedIn Live, and thank you, Mohan and Kuna.
Thank you, Anika.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Arnika. Let me I'll take down the live.
Thanks, everybody. Yep, I got it. I ended the stream.
Okay.
Was there anyone on?
Yeah, there were about from my view, it was about 25.
Oh, really?